You ever have one of those days where everything just seems to go wrong? Your alarm doesn't go off, you spill coffee on your shirt, traffic is a nightmare, and by the time you get to work, your inbox is overflowing with problems you didn't see coming. It feels like the universe is conspiring against you, doesn't it? Chaos isn't just something that happens out there in the world. It's the noise in our heads, the pressure in our chests, the sense that no matter how hard we try, we're always one step behind. And here's the thing, that feeling isn't new. 2,000 years ago, in the bustling markets of ancient Rome, people were wrestling with the exact same emotions: frustration, overwhelm, the sense that life was happening to them rather than for them. But they had a secret weapon, a way to stand firm when the world felt like it was spinning out of control. That weapon was Stoicism. Stoicism isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's about clarity. It's about recognizing that while you can't control the chaos around you, you can always control how you respond to it. The Stoics called this inner fortress, the unshakable core of wisdom and resilience that keeps you steady when storms rage outside. And the best part, you don't have to be a philosopher to build it. The Stoics left us a blueprint, a set of mental frames, ways of seeing the world that transform chaos from something that overwhelms us into something we can navigate with purpose and even grace. That's what this video is about: 25 Stoic frames that act like anchors in the storm. These aren't abstract ideas, they're practical, battle-tested tools that help you reframe setbacks, master your reactions, and find peace even when everything feels like it's falling apart. Whether you're dealing with a difficult boss, a personal crisis, or just the daily grind that leaves you exhausted, these frames are your lifeline. So if you're ready to stop feeling like life is happening to you and start feeling like you're the one steering the ship, stick around. This is how you stay centered no matter what. The first and most fundamental Stoic frame is the dichotomy of control. Picture this: 2,000 years ago, a former slave named Epictetus stood in a crowded classroom in Greece, teaching students one simple but radical idea: some things are up to us and some things are not. That's it, that's the foundation. Everything else in Stoicism builds from this. Most of our suffering comes from forgetting that line, from wasting energy trying to change what we can't while neglecting the power we actually have. Take something as ordinary as a traffic jam. You're running late, the cars ahead aren't moving, and your grip tightens on the steering wheel. Here's the Stoic question: can you magically clear the road? No. Can you control the driver who cut you off? No. But your frustration, your clenched jaw, the way you mutter under your breath, that's all you. The chaos isn't the traffic, it's your reaction to it. Epictetus would say the jam itself is indifferent. What matters is whether you let it turn you into someone impatient and angry, or someone who stays calm and adapts. Or think about a workplace conflict. A coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting. Your face flushes, your pulse races. That's natural. But here's the fork in the road. You can't control their actions or whether the boss notices. What you can control is whether you stew in resentment or choose a strategic response. Maybe you document your contributions more clearly next time. Maybe you address it privately. The point isn't to shrug and say whatever. It's to pour your energy into the arena where you actually have influence. This frame flips chaos on its head. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What part of this can I own?" Because when you stop fighting the uncontrollable, you free up stamina for what truly matters: your choices, your effort, your character. That's the Stoic shift, recognizing that the real battlefield isn't out there, it's in here. Now imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind howling around you, the ground unstable beneath your feet. Most people would panic, scrambling for safety. But what if instead of resisting you leaned into the gust, letting it teach you balance? That's the essence of Amor Fati, the Stoic practice of loving your fate. Marcus Aurelius scribbled it in his journals 2 millennia ago. and Friedrich Nietzsche later called it his formula for greatness. This isn't passive acceptance. It's active embrace, the deliberate choice to meet life's sharpest edges and say, yes, even this. Consider the inventor James Dyson. Before creating the vacuum that made him a billionaire, he built 5,267 prototypes that failed. Every dead end, every skeptical investor, every sleepless night could have been a reason to quit. But Dyson didn't just tolerate those setbacks, he revered them. Each failure was a clue narrowing the path to success. That's Amor Fati in action, seeing obstacles as the very material you need to construct something extraordinary. The Stoics knew this intimately. When a fever nearly killed Marcus Aurelius, he didn't curse his body. He used the recovery to reflect on mortality, leaving us Meditations, a book that still guides millions today. When the Roman Emperor Vespasian faced ridicule for taxing public toilets, he famously held a coin to his nose and said, "Money doesn't stink." He turned mockery into revenue that rebuilt a war-torn city. These weren't just comebacks, they were alchemy transforming leaden moments into gold. Here's how to practice it. Next time you're stuck in a long line, instead of simmering, use those minutes to observe people or draft an idea in your notes. When a project falls through, ask, what hidden door just opened? Even grief, as brutal as it is, carves depth into your capacity for joy. The chaos you resent today might be the scaffolding for the person you're becoming tomorrow. Nietzsche put it best, my formula for human greatness is amor fati, not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it. That shift from resistance to reverence is where ordinary endurance becomes extraordinary power. The storm doesn't change, but you stop bracing against the wind and learn to sail with it. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine floating high above the earth, watching your entire city shrink to the size of a postage stamp. The bustling streets, the honking cars, the office where you sat stressed hours earlier, all of it now just a tiny speck in the vast mosaic of civilization. This isn't science fiction. It's the view from above, a mental exercise Roman emperors like Marcus Aurelius used to ground themselves when the weight of power threatened to crush them. Picture Marcus, ruler of an empire stretching from Britain to Egypt, sitting in his tent on the German frontier. Barbarian tribes threaten the borders, advisors bicker, and the fate of millions rests on his decisions. How does he stay calm? He closes his eyes and envisions the planet from space wars, politics, even his own legacy reduced to fleeting shadows against the backdrop of eternity. The Stoics called this cosmic perspective, and it's astonishingly effective at deflating modern anxieties. That argument with your neighbor over a parking spot. From 10,000 feet, it's invisible. The promotion you didn't get, a blip in the timeline of your career, even major crises, a breakup, a financial hit, lose their sharp edges when held against the enormity of time and space. This isn't about dismissing your struggles, it's about contextualizing them. The human brain magnifies problems when they're all we see. Zoom out and suddenly you're no longer trapped in the storm, you're observing it from a place of stillness. Astronauts call this the overview effect, a profound shift in awareness that happens when seeing Earth from orbit. Borders vanish, petty conflicts seem absurd. People who have experienced it describe an overwhelming sense of connection and peace. You don't need a rocket ship to access it. The Stoics practiced it through visualization, and you can too. Next time you're drowning in deadlines or social drama, pause. Imagine your block from a drone's view, then your country from a satellite, then the pale blue dot of Earth from the edge of the solar system. Feel your heartbeat slow as the big picture comes into focus. Marcus wrote, "Keep this constantly in mind that all of this has happened before and will happen again." The meetings, the traffic jams, the heartaches, they're part of an ancient cycle. Seen from above, your chaos isn't erased. It's just folded into something much, much larger. And in that fold, there's freedom. There's an old Stoic exercise that might sound counterintuitive at first. What if, instead of dodging your worst fears, you invited them in for tea? The Romans called this Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. Seneca, the philosopher who advised Emperor Nero, swore by it. He'd regularly sit down and mentally walk through losing his wealth, his status, even his health. Not to torture himself, but to disarm the power those fears held over him. Think of it like emotional fire drills. By rehearsing disaster in your mind, you're never caught off guard when life inevitably throws a curveball. Picture this: you wake up to an email, your position at work is being eliminated. Your stomach drops. Now, fast forward 6 months. How are you surviving? Maybe you've updated your resume, reached out to old contacts, started a side hustle. By visualizing the details, the job search, the temporary belt tightening, you've already mapped the path forward. That's the magic of Premeditatio Malorum. It's not about pessimism, it's about preparedness. Seneca wrote, "The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." Consider how Navy SEAL train. Before a mission, they rehearse every possible failure, equipment malfunctions, ambushes, injuries. When things go wrong in the field, their response is automatic because they've already lived it in their mind. Or take modern investors who practice pre-mortems, imagining their portfolios crashing to identify vulnerabilities before real money's at stake. The principle is the same. Confront the worst-case scenario while you're calm, so panic doesn't hijack you later. Here's how to apply it. Start small. Next time you're waiting for a friend who's late, resist checking your phone every 30 seconds. Instead, ask, if they never show up, how will I spend this time productively? Maybe you'll finish a chapter of that book or brainstorm ideas for a project. The goal isn't to assume betrayal, but to reclaim agency over your attention. Then scale it up. Before a big meeting, spend 5 minutes imagining it going terribly. What if the client hates your pitch? What if your tech fails? By naming these ghosts ahead of time, they lose their fangs. Seneca's own life proved the power of this practice. When Nero ordered his death, the philosopher didn't beg or rage. He'd mentally rehearsed this moment for years, his final act dictating letters of wisdom to his students as blood drained from his veins. That's the ultimate triumph of Premeditatio Malorum, not just bracing for impact, but discovering in advance who you'll choose to be when the storm hits. Every great Stoic carried a secret weapon, not a sword or shield, but a simple phrase whispered in the quiet hours of dawn: Memento Mori, remember you must die. It sounds morbid at first glance, but this ancient practice was anything but despair. The Romans carved it into rings, medieval monks placed skulls on their desks, and Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say. Far from paralyzing them, this daily confrontation with death sharpened their clarity like a whetstone on steel. Modern culture treats mortality like an awkward guest we hurry past, avoiding wills, skipping uncomfortable conversations, drowning the thought in endless scrolling. But the Stoics knew what we've forgotten. Death isn't the enemy of meaning, it's the architect. Imagine holding an hourglass where the last grains are invisible. Would you waste time resentfully comparing yourself to others? Would you postpone that hard conversation, that creative leap, that overdue apology? The sand falls whether you watch it or not. Memento Mori turns that truth into fuel. Steve Jobs exemplified this. After his cancer diagnosis, he stood before Stanford's graduating class and said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." That speech wasn't about dying, it was about designing. Death's inevitability stripped away others' expectations, leaving only what truly mattered to him. The Stoics called this the stripping method, using mortality's blade to pare life down to its essential core. Contrast this with how we typically operate. We delay passions for someday, sacrifice presence for productivity, trade vibrant relationships for petty grievances. Why? Because death feels distant until it isn't. The Stoics practiced their own version of Memento Mori rituals. Seneca ended each day by asking, "Have I lived or merely existed?" Roman generals celebrating triumphs employed a slave to whisper in their ear, "Look behind you. Remember you are mortal." Even victory was framed as fleeting. Here's the paradox: by keeping death close, they squeezed more life from each moment. A writer facing blank pages might agonize over critics until she asks, "If this were my last story, what would I dare to say?" A parent snapping at a child might pause, realizing, "One day I'll crave these chaotic bedtime rituals." Mortality's gift is urgency paired with tenderness. It's the reason a sunset moves us more deeply when we know it's our last vacation night, why laughter rings clearer in a friend's final months. The Stoics didn't just accept death, they let it mentor them. Epictetus advised, "When you kiss your child good night, whisper to yourself, they may die tomorrow." Not to breed fear, but to flood the ordinary with sacred attention. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies show that Memento Mori reflections reduce trivial worries and increase generosity. When researchers asked people to imagine their eulogies, they instantly prioritized legacy over ego. So try this tonight. Light a candle, open your notes app, or walk under the stars. Ask yourself, if I had 1 year left, what would I stop doing? What would I start? Who would I thank or forgive? Then act as if that year is guaranteed. That's the alchemy of Memento Mori. It doesn't steal joy. It returns you to the joy that was always there. The deadline you resent becomes time you're gifted. The stranger's smile turns precious. Even fear softens, because a life fully seen is a life finally lived. As Seneca wrote, death takes the anxiety from our future years by showing us that we've already been given everything we need in the present. The hourglass isn't your foe. It's the compass. The Stoics had a radical way of flipping life's setbacks on their head. They didn't just endure obstacles, they hunted them down. While most of us spend our energy avoiding discomfort, figures like Cotto the Younger deliberately sought it out. He'd walk barefoot through Rome's icy streets, wear thin clothing in winter, and eat plain meals even when he could afford feasts. This wasn't self-punishment. It was training. The Stoics called this voluntary discomfort, and its purpose was razor-sharp: to inoculate yourself against fortune's blows by choosing small hardships before they could be forced upon you. Think of it like a muscle. If you've never lifted weights, the first trip to the gym leaves you sore and gasping. But if you train consistently, what once felt impossible becomes manageable. The Stoics applied this to life itself. By routinely stepping into discomfort, skipping a meal, taking a cold shower, sleeping on the floor, they built resilience reserves for when real crises hit. Seneca put it bluntly: set aside a certain number of days to eat only the cheapest food, wear rough clothes, and ask yourself, is this what I used to dread? History's greatest innovators understood this instinctively. Before founding SpaceX, Elon Musk lived on $1 a day during an internship, testing his tolerance for scarcity. Basketball legend Kobe Bryant practiced in unheated gyms at 4 in the morning, not because he had to, but because he wanted to know he could perform under miserable conditions. These aren't stories of suffering for its own sake, they're masterclasses in obstacle as opportunity. Here's the psychological magic at work. When you voluntarily embrace discomfort, you redefine your relationship with it. A delayed flight becomes a chance to journal. A power outage turns into an unplanned digital detox. Even pain, when approached with curiosity, can reveal hidden strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the core of these twin frames. Voluntary discomfort prepares you, while obstacle as opportunity transforms setbacks into fuel. Try this today. Leave your jacket at home on a chilly morning and notice how the cold sharpens your senses. Decline the dessert you crave and observe the discipline it builds. Small, deliberate acts of discomfort train you to meet life's inevitable chaos with the same calm Cotto showed when Julius Caesar's troops stormed Rome unshaken, because he'd already weathered 1,000 self-made storms. The obstacle wasn't his enemy, it was his teacher, and the more he sought it out, the less it could surprise him. Modern science backs this up. Studies on stress inoculation show that controlled exposure to adversity, like vaccines introducing weakened viruses, strengthens emotional immunity. Navy SEAL endure Hell Week not to break candidates, but to reveal who can reframe agony as growth. The Stoics were pioneers of this mindset centuries earlier. Their secret: they didn't wait for chaos to find them, they courted it, and in doing so, discovered that the very things we run from are the whetstones that sharpen us. So the next time life hands you a setback, ask Cotto's question: how can this difficulty serve me? Maybe the missed promotion frees you to pursue a bolder path. Maybe the broken laptop forces a creative reset. Discomfort, voluntary or not, is never just pain, it's information, and the Stoics knew that information is power. Seneca once joked that fortune could take his wealth but not his laughter. That's the ultimate triumph of these frames. When you stop fearing obstacles and start leveraging them, you don't just survive chaos, you command it. Picture this: it's the dead of night in a military camp on the German frontier. The Emperor of Rome sits alone, a single lamp flickering as his pen scratches across parchment. Outside, war looms. Inside, Marcus Aurelius isn't strategizing battles or drafting decrees. He's holding court with his own mind. What survives from those private pages isn't polished philosophy. It's raw self-talk, a masterclass in turning inner chaos into clarity. This wasn't just journaling, this was prosauch, the Stoic practice of vigilant self-awareness. And here's the twist: you don't need an empire to wield its power. Marcus's meditations, never intended for publication, reveal a relentless pattern. He'd begin by naming his struggles plainly. When you wake reluctant, or say to yourself at daybreak, no vague venting. Just stark observations, as if diagnosing a fever. Then came the Stoic reframe: the impediment to action advances action. He wasn't dismissing his frustration, he was alchemizing it. Finally, he'd anchor himself in universal truths. All that happens is as normal as spring rising or autumn falling. 3 moves: observation, transformation, perspective. That turned his journal into a forge for resilience. Modern research confirms what the Stoics knew intuitively. Expressive writing, especially about emotional upheavals, boosts immune function, lowers stress hormones, and even helps wounds heal faster. But there's a catch: it only works when you move beyond ranting into reflection. That's where Stoic prompts differ from typical journaling. Instead of "why does this always happen to me?" they ask, "what part of this did I contribute to?" Instead of "I can't handle this," they probe, "what would handling it look like?" Try these 3 Stoic prompts tonight. First, the morning claritas. What one thing could make today a success, regardless of outcomes? Not a to-do list item, but a quality patience with a difficult coworker, focused during a project. Next, the evening audit. Where did I act against my values today, and what repair is needed? No self-flagellation, just clear-eyed accounting. Finally, the obstacle drill. If my worst fear about this situation came true, what would my next step be? This isn't pessimism, it's strategic rehearsal. Consider how composer Ludwig van Beethoven used a similar practice. Deafness should have ended his career. Instead, his journals show him wrestling with despair, then pivoting. "I will seize fate by the throat." Those pages became his laboratory for reinvention, leading to masterpieces like the Ninth Symphony. Or modern CEOs like Tim Ferriss, who credit Stoic journaling with helping him navigate business crises by separating what's happening from what story am I telling about it. The magic lies in structure. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Begin with brute facts. My partner criticized my cooking. My face got hot. Then interrogate interpretations. Is their comment a personal attack or a preference? Have I ever misworded feedback? Finally, prescribe action. Tomorrow, I'll ask for specifics or try one new recipe. This mirrors Marcus's method, untangling the knot of emotion to reveal the thread of agency beneath. Stationery doesn't matter. A notes app works, so does voice memos while commuting. What matters is the shift from passive victim to active observer. Seneca described it as retiring into yourself, building an inner citadel where external events lose their power to derail you. Your journal isn't a confessional booth. It's a training ground where chaos gets drafted into service, where yesterday's frustration becomes tomorrow's wisdom. So tonight, when the world feels loud, do what emperors and artists have done for millennia. Take up your pen, not to record what happened to you, but to decide what happens next. Imagine a pond on a windless morning so still that when you drop a pebble, the ripples stretch all the way to the edges. Now picture a second stone dropping nearby. The two sets of waves don't collide, they merge, becoming part of the same pattern. That's Sympatheia, the Stoic concept that every action we take reverberates through the whole of humanity, because we're not isolated individuals but threads in a vast, interconnected tapestry. Hierocles, a Stoic philosopher from the 2nd century, gave us a practical tool to visualize this. He described concentric circles like rings on that pond. At the center, you, the next ring out, your family, then friends, neighbors, countrymen, all humanity. Here's the radical part. Hierocles didn't just say we should care about these outer circles. He instructed us to draw them inward. Treat your neighbor like a cousin. See a stranger as you would a teammate. The goal isn't to erase natural bonds, but to stretch your sense of belonging until us and them start to blur. Think about how sports teams operate. Players compete fiercely against rivals until someone gets injured. Suddenly, both teams kneel in solidarity. The game pauses. Rivalry fades beneath a deeper truth, shared humanity. Stoics argue this instinct shouldn't just emerge in crises. It's a muscle to exercise daily. When Marcus Aurelius faced barbarian tribes threatening Rome's borders, he didn't dehumanize them. He wrote, "What harms the hive harms the bee." Even his enemies were part of a system he sought to understand. Modern science echoes this ancient wisdom. Research on moral expansiveness shows that people who mentally include outsiders in their circles, seeing refugees as fellow parents or political opponents as neighbors, are more likely to act with compassion. During the COVID pandemic, communities that embraced this mindset had lower infection rates. Why? Because when you view others as limbs of the same body, their suffering feels like your own. Here's how to practice Sympatheia today. Next time you're stuck in traffic, notice how each car holds someone with their own urgent story. A nurse finishing a double shift, a student rushing to an exam. When a coworker frustrates you, ask what unspoken pressures might be shaping their behavior. Even social media arguments soften when you envision the person behind the profile, a real human who, like you, believes they're fighting for what's right. The Stoics weren't naive. They knew conflict is inevitable, but by framing humanity as a single organism, they found a North Star. What serves the whole ultimately serves each part. Just as your hand instinctively shields your eyes from debris, societies thrive when individuals act as guardians of the collective. Epictetus put it bluntly, you are a citizen of the universe. Not just your town, your tribe, or your ideology. The ripples you create today will touch shores you'll never see, so make them widen, not divide. That's the power of Sympatheia, turning chaos into connection, one expanded circle at a time. Here's how the Stoics cut through emotional chaos like a scalpel. They practiced something Epictetus called objective representation. It's the art of stripping away the dramatic labels we slap onto events and seeing them as they actually are, not as our racing hearts interpret them. Think of it like turning down the volume on a blaring alarm. What's left isn't silence but clarity. Take a phrase like, "My boss hates me." feels true when you're simmering after a tough meeting, doesn't it? But let's dissect it like a Stoic. What's the raw data? Maybe your boss criticized your report or didn't respond to your email. Those are observable facts. Hate, that's a story you've layered on top, a mental filter tinting everything red. Epictetus would say that filter is where suffering lives. Your boss's actions are indifferent. Your judgment about those actions is what stings. This isn't about playing Pollyanna, it's forensic. Imagine you're a scientist documenting an experiment. At 11:15 a.m., Subject B crossed arms during my presentation and stated, "These numbers don't align with projections. No, they're out to get me," just a detached record. That shift alone drains the drama from the situation, giving you space to respond strategically instead of reacting emotionally. History's greatest leaders used this tool instinctively. When Abraham Lincoln received vicious personal attacks in the press, he'd reframe them as feedback from constituents, neutralizing poison into data. Modern therapists call this cognitive diffusion, teaching clients to watch thoughts like clouds passing rather than truths to obey. The Stoics were there first. Marcus Aurelius journaled reminders like, "Cut its awful narrative, just state what happened. Try it next time emotions hijack you." "My partner forgot our anniversary" becomes, "Partner did not mention the date of May 7th. This traffic is ruining my life" turns into, "Vehicles on Highway 10 are moving at 15 miles per hour. Suddenly, the emotional charge dissipates, revealing the real question: now what? Maybe you'll realize your boss's critique highlights a skill to improve. Maybe the forgotten anniversary sparks a calm conversation about love languages. Epictetus trained his students to drill this daily. When a messenger delivered bad news, they'd first repeat the facts verbatim, "The ship sank," before adding interpretations like, "We're doomed." That pause between event and reaction, that's where freedom lies. Because when you stop conflating what happened with what it means, chaos loses its fangs. The storm still rages, but you're no longer drowning in the stories you tell yourself about it. The Stoics divided wisdom into three core disciplines: desire, action, and assent, not as abstract concepts, but as daily practices to tame chaos. Picture a charioteer steering wild horses. Desire is choosing which pastures to race toward. Action is how you guide the reins, and assent is the moment-by-moment decision to either fight the terrain or flow with it. Together, they form an antidote to one of modernity's great plagues, mistaking society's applause for true north. Consider how desire operates in most lives. We chase promotions to feel validated, accumulate followers to feel seen, and check off milestones only to find the goalposts keep moving. The Stoics called this Premeditatio, preliminary passions, those knee-jerk cravings for externals we can't control. Epictetus reframed desire entirely. Freedom isn't attaining what you want, but wanting what is already within your grasp. That's the first discipline, training desire to align with virtue rather than validation. When entrepreneur Sarah Blakely founded Spanx, she ignored naysayers not through sheer willpower, but by anchoring her ambition in a deeper why, solving a problem, not proving herself. Her metric wasn't sales figures but integrity, a classic Stoic pivot. Then comes action, the discipline of doing with principle, not just for outcomes. Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders like, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be one." Here's where modern hustle culture gets Stoicism backward. It's not about grinding harder, it's about ensuring your efforts serve something larger than ego. Take Florence Nightingale during the Crimean War. While others acted for glory, she changed nursing by focusing on one question: what does compassion demand right now? Her actions weren't scattered, they were channeled through the sieve of service. Assent, the most subtle discipline, governs how we interpret events. When adversity strikes, most people layer on judgments. "This is unfair," or "I can't handle this." The Stoics practiced withholding immediate mental approval or rejection. Like a sage examining a coin, they'd ask, is this truly bad or just inconvenient? When inventor Thomas Edison's lab burned down, destroying years of work, his response was pure Stoic assent. All our mistakes are now ashes. We can start fresh. He didn't deny the loss, he refused to let his perception magnify it. Together, these disciplines form a bulwark against existential whiplash. Desire tethered to virtue means you're not yanked around by others' opinions. Action rooted in principle turns chaos into purposeful motion, and assent, that pause between event and reaction, is where you reclaim authorship of your story. As Seneca wrote, no wind is favorable if you don't know your port. The storm might rage, but your compass stays fixed. That's the power of these three disciplines. They don't just help you weather chaos. They help you navigate by the stars. You're standing on the banks of ancient Athens, watching a weathered philosopher named Cleans gather firewood by day and lecture by night. What kept this student of Zeno, who would later lead the Stoic school, grounded through poverty and ridicule? His breath. Not just involuntary inhales, but deliberate, measured rhythms that became his anchor. 2,000 years later, neuroscientists would discover what Cleans knew instinctively. The breath isn't just oxygen exchange, it's the remote control for your nervous system. Here's the science. When you're hijacked by stress, your amygdala screams danger, flooding your body with cortisol. But the vagus nerve, a biological telegraph wire connecting brain to body, can mute that alarm. And guess what activates it? Slow, diaphragmatic breathing. Researchers at Stanford found that extending exhales triggers the vagus nerve like a brake pedal, switching you from fight or flight to rest and digest. The US Army now trains soldiers in tactical breathing before deployments. Silicon Valley execs use it before pitches. Let's borrow Clean's technique right now. Close your eyes if you can, or just soften your gaze. Inhale deeply through your nose for 4 counts, feeling your ribs expand like bellows. Hold for 2. Now exhale slowly for 6, imagining tension draining through your feet. Again, 4 in, 2 pause, 6 out. That uneven ratio, longer exhales, is the key. It's why Navy SEAL used this under gunfire, and why Marcus Aurelius wrote about returning to your breath as his empire crumbled. Cleans called this pneuma, the vital breath that unites body and reason. Modern labs measure its effects. Heart rate variability improves within 90 seconds. Decision-making sharpens. One study had subjects breathe this way before public speaking. Their cortisol levels dropped by half. The Stoics didn't have EEG machines, but they recognized what Harvard now teaches. Mastery begins between one breath and the next. So next time chaos strikes, a screaming toddler, a toxic email, a panic attack looming, remember, your breaths are your reins. Not metaphorically, but chemically. 4 in, 2 pause, 6 out. The storm might not cease, but you'll no longer be lost in it. As Cleans proved, hauling wood without resentment, sometimes the mightiest tool is the one you carry in your lungs. Ancient mariners understood something we've forgotten. No matter how skilled the captain or sturdy the ship, the ocean always has the final say. That's why Greek and Roman sailors would etch 2 small but powerful words onto their voyage plans: reservatio, meaning fate permitting. They'd set their course with ambition, but also with humility, knowing storms could redirect them at any moment. This was the Stoic reserve clause, a mental footnote added to every goal. I will succeed if nothing prevents me. Not as defeatism, but as liberation, because attaching that disclaimer meant frustration couldn't hijack them when plans changed. Fast forward to today. We set goals like ultimatums: I will get promoted this year, or this relationship must work, as if the universe signed a contract to comply. Then when life intercedes, a recession hits, a partner walks away, we crumble, convinced some cosmic injustice occurred. The Stoics would diagnose this as volitional resistance, the pain that comes from demanding reality bend to our will rather than aligning our will with reality's contours. Consider two entrepreneurs. The first insists, "My startup will hit $1 million in sales this year." The second declares, "I'll do everything in my power to reach 1 million, fate permitting." The first sees a market downturn as personal failure. The second adapts, pivoting to survive the storm. Both faced the same gale, but only one brought an emotional life raft. That's the reserve clause in action. It transforms rigid expectations into flexible intentions. History's most resilient figures mastered this. When explorer Ernest Shackleton's ship was crushed by Antarctic ice, he didn't rage against the injustice. His journal reveals the reserve clause at work. We might still reach land if the pack drifts favorably. That mental flexibility kept his crew alive for 2 years on shifting ice floes. Or take modern athletes like tennis legend Roger Federer, who famously said, "I'll give 100%, then accept whatever comes." Not lack of drive, just wisdom to separate effort from attachment. Here's how to apply it today. Next time you set a goal, whether it's finishing a project or repairing a relationship, add that silent asterisk, "if nothing prevents me." Not to dilute your commitment, but to inoculate yourself against the paralysis of perfectionism. The promotion might not come, but you can still excel in your role. The apology might not be accepted, but you can still clean your side of the street. The Stoics weren't teaching resignation. They were architects of antifragility, building goals that don't just withstand chaos but grow stronger from it. As Seneca wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." The reserve clause is your way of walking hand in hand with fate rather than being pulled by the collar. Because when you stop conflating plans with promises, you free yourself to navigate the unexpected, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a partner with the unknown. Centuries before hashtags and globalization, a man named Diogenes, when asked where he was from, simply declared, "I am a citizen of the world." This wasn't just clever wordplay. It was a radical idea that would shape Stoicism's most enduring frame. Cosmopolitanism, the belief that every human being shares a fundamental bond that transcends borders, languages, and tribes. In an era where empires clashed and identities were rigid, the Stoics argued that our true citizenship wasn't in any one city, but in the collective human experience. Fast forward to today, where cultural fault lines seem deeper than ever, political polarization, social media echo chambers, even workplace tensions over values. The Stoic cosmopolitan doesn't just endure these divides, they see them as opportunities to practice what Marcus Aurelius called the art of living among strangers. Consider how this plays out in modern conflicts. Two co-workers clash over a controversial news story. One sees it as a free speech issue, the other as systemic harm. The typical responses: dig in harder or avoid the topic entirely. The cosmopolitan approach starts with Seneca's advice: wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness. Not agreement, not concession, but recognizing that beneath the ideological armor are universal fears and hopes. When tech CEO Satya Nadella took over Microsoft, he inherited a cutthroat culture. Instead of fostering factions, he instituted listening sessions where teams shared personal stories unrelated to work, childhood memories, family traditions. The result: collaboration soared because people stopped seeing colleagues as ideological opponents and started seeing them as complex humans. The Stoics took this further with their concept of oikeiosis, a gradual expansion of empathy. Picture a series of doors. Behind the first is your family, behind the next your community, then your nation, and finally all of humanity. The practice isn't to abandon closer ties, but to consciously widen your circle of concern. When the Roman statesman Cicero, influenced by Stoicism, defended the poet Archer as a foreigner accused of fraud, he didn't appeal to legal technicalities. He argued that excluding outsiders impoverishes society. What belongs to anyone with talent belongs to all who cherish it. Apply this to today's cultural flashpoints. A heated debate about immigration policy becomes more constructive when you ask, what would it look like to argue as if the other person's perspective contained partial truth? A family feud over tradition softens when you probe what unspoken fear might be driving their rigidity. This isn't about compromising principles. It's about recognizing, as Epictetus did, that no one does wrong willingly, that even those we vilify are acting from what they mistakenly believe is right. History's greatest bridge builders operated this way. During the civil rights movement, James Baldwin didn't just condemn segregationists, he documented their humanity, writing, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense, once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain." Modern research confirms this approach. Studies on dialogue facilitation show that when opposing groups share meals and personal stories not to persuade, but to understand, prejudice drops by nearly 40%. The Stoics anticipated this psychology 2 millennia ago. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire spanning countless cultures, yet his journal pulses with reminders like people exist for one another. Not just Romans, not just allies, people, period. In our hyper-connected age, cosmopolitanism isn't naive idealism, it's survival instinct. When algorithms profit from outrage and politicians exploit division, the real rebellion is opting out of the tribal binary. Not by ignoring differences, but by honoring them without fetishizing them. So tomorrow, when you encounter someone whose worldview feels alien, maybe even threatening, channel Diogenes. Not to agree, but to ask, what part of their story mirrors fears or hopes I've felt? Because cosmopolitanism isn't about erasing borders, it's about remembering their human constructions, and that beneath them all, the same ground holds us up. Seneca sat in his villa outside Rome, dictating letters to his friend Lucilius while political storms raged in the capital. One phrase resurfaces like a drumbeat through those pages: nothing is burdensome if taken lightly. At first glance, it sounds like dismissal, but the Stoic meaning cuts deeper. What Seneca was prescribing wasn't indifference, but proportionality, the art of matching your emotional voltage to the actual wattage of events. 2,000 years later, our outrage economy runs on the exact opposite principle, collapsing every inconvenience into catastrophe, every disagreement into existential threat. Your phone pings with a notification someone's misrepresented your view in a tweet, and suddenly your pulse spikes as if facing a saber-tooth. Seneca would ask, does this reaction serve you or enslave you? Consider how social media hijacks our nervous systems. A study from New York University tracked users' physiological responses while scrolling. Within minutes, resting heart rates increased by 20%, comparable to drinking 3 espressos. Why? Because platforms engineer false proportionality. A stranger's rude comment triggers the same cortisol surge as ancestral humans spotting a predator. The Stoics diagnosed this glitch centuries ago, when Epictetus taught, it's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. He was outlining what neuroscientists now call appraisal theory, the brain's 2-step process where stimuli get tagged as threats before we consciously react. Seneca's letters dissect this with surgical precision. In On Anger, he recounts how Emperor Augustus, upon hearing a man slandered him, simply replied, "Let him hate so long as he fears." Not Stoic suppression, strategic calibration. Contrast that with modern viral pile-ons, where a celebrity's decade-old tweet sparks mass demands for career annihilation. The Stoics wouldn't advocate ignoring harm. They'd question whether performative fury actually reforms behavior or just feeds our dopamine addiction to moral superiority. History offers masterclasses in proportional response. When Abraham Lincoln's generals begged him to crush Southern rebels post-Civil War, he insisted on malice toward none. Not because he underestimated the damage, but because he foresaw how cycles of vengeance would poison reconciliation. Modern research validates this. Studies on restorative justice show that victims who demand proportionality rather than maximal punishment experience faster emotional recovery. The Stoic secret: they graded suffering objectively. Losing a job ranks differently than losing a child. A social media slur isn't genocide. By refusing to flatten all pain into one paralyzing mass, they preserved their capacity to respond rather than react. Try this reframe next time outrage tempts you. Before resharing that inflammatory post, ask Seneca's question: what's the actual harm here? If a coworker takes credit for your idea, is a public scorched earth campaign necessary, or would a private conversation resolve it? This isn't about being a doormat, it's about conserving emotional energy for battles worthy of your finite life. The Roman general Scipio Africanus exemplified this when facing insults. Rather than dueling every critic, he'd say, "People talk as they are, not as things are." The irony: proportionality isn't passive, it's powerful. When gymnast Simone Biles withdrew from Olympic events citing mental health, critics called it weakness. Her measured response of prioritizing personal limits over external expectations sparked a global conversation on athlete well-being. That's Stoic calibration in action, matching the scale of your response to the depth of your values, not the volume of the crowd. Social media will keep monetizing your amygdala. The Stoic alternative isn't apathy, it's the razor's edge between caring deeply and dissolving into the chaos. As Seneca wrote in his final letter before Nero forced his suicide, "No one can be contemptuous who truly understands the weight of things. Outrage is easy. Wisdom is knowing what deserves your thunder." Marcus Aurelius didn't rule Rome from a marble palace, he governed from within a fortress of his own making. Not one made of stone, but of principles so unshakable that even as barbarians threatened the empire and plague swept the streets, his journal reveals an eerie calm. He called this sanctuary the inner citadel, and its blueprint remains one of Stoicism's most powerful tools for weathering modern chaos. Picture it like this: your mind is a castle. The outer walls, your core values, non-negotiables like integrity, courage, compassion. The gatekeepers, your discipline to guard what enters, and the central tower. That's your ability to observe storms without being swept away by them. History offers a vivid test of this framework. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus was accused of embezzlement, his rivals expected rage or panic. Instead, he simply said, "On this day I saved Rome." No rebuttal, no frantic defense, just the quiet certainty of a man whose self-worth wasn't for sale. Contrast that with how most of us operate. A negative performance review triggers a spiral of self-doubt. A social media slight fuels sleepless nights. Why? Because we've left our citadel gates wide open, allowing external judgments to storm the throne room. The Stoics mapped 4 layers to this mental fortress. First, the moat, your filters for what deserves attention. Just as castles used water to slow invaders, you might ask, does this email truly require my outrage, or can it wait until after lunch? Next, the walls, your virtues. For Marcus, these were wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. When advisors whispered lies about his rivals, he'd return to justice. What does fairness demand here? Using virtue as a compass, not gossip as fuel. Then comes the armory, your prepared responses. Ancient generals didn't wait for battle to sharpen swords, they stockpiled weapons in advance. Your version, mental rehearsals. Before entering a high-stakes meeting, you might visualize maintaining poise if interrupted, or responding to criticism with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Finally, the keep, that unassailable core where you witness chaos without becoming it. Modern neuroscience calls this metacognition, the ability to observe your own thoughts like a mountain watching weather. When Marcus wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something, it doesn't have to upset you," he was describing this very skill. Consider how psychiatrist Viktor Frankl employed his inner citadel in Auschwitz. While prisoners around him collapsed into despair, he mentally retreated to a space where Nazi guards couldn't follow, a realm of choice. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, he later wrote, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That's the Citadel's ultimate purpose, not to escape reality, but to master your stance within it. Your fortress won't look like Marcus's or Frankel's. Maybe your walls include creativity instead of temperance, or humor as a drawbridge to lower when others attack. The key is construction. Start small. Identify one non-negotiable, say honesty, and notice when chaos tempts you to abandon it. A client demands unethical shortcuts, that's your wall being tested. A friend spreads gossip, your gatekeepers decide whether to let it in. The Stoics weren't naive. They knew citadels get battered, but as Marcus reminded himself, the mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. Every siege, whether ancient Rome's or your inboxes, becomes material to strengthen your defenses. Because the goal isn't to avoid storms, it's to stand so firmly within yourself that no storm can determine your worth. Seneca once joked that anger is like throwing yourself onto a pyre because someone splashed you with water, an absurd overreaction that reveals more about the reactor than the offense. This wasn't just wit, it was weaponized humor, a Stoic tool for disarming life's irritations before they could metastasize into rage. While modern culture often frames Stoicism as grim endurance, the ancients knew laughter was its secret ally. Seneca's letters are peppered with dark quips comparing greed to itching scabs and vanity to painting a corpse, not to trivialize suffering but to expose its foolishness. The Stoic punchline, most of what upsets us deserves a chuckle, not a meltdown. Take a scene straight from Seneca's playbook. Imagine you're stuck behind someone at the grocery store arguing over a 12-cent coupon. Your pulse rises, your jaw tightens until you zoom out. Here's a creature capable of composing symphonies and curing diseases, now red-faced over pennies. The absurdity is almost poetic. That shift from frustration to amused observation is what the Stoics called demonstratio ridiculi, the art of highlighting life's ridiculousness to drain its emotional venom. Psychologists now call this cognitive reappraisal, and studies show it lowers stress hormones faster than venting. History's great levelers wielded this skill masterfully. When Diogenes was mocked for living in a barrel, he shot back, "Athens gives me a tub for a house and a barrel for a throne." Voltaire, influenced by Stoicism, turned Europe's injustices into satirical novels like Candide, where characters face disaster after disaster with deadpan optimism. Even in concentration camps, psychiatrist Viktor Frankl noted prisoners who crafted dark jokes about their captors retained their sanity longer. Why? Because humor doesn't deny pain, it reframes it as something survivable. Here's how to practice Stoic stand-up today. Next time your flight gets cancelled, instead of ranting at the gate agent, play a mental game. What would this look like in a sitcom? Maybe you're the hapless protagonist, the universe a mischievous showrunner. When a coworker takes credit for your idea, imagine them as a cartoon villain twirling a mustache. The goal isn't to avoid addressing the issue, but to approach it with creative detachment. Seneca perfected this. Falsely accused of treason, he reportedly told Nero's executioners, "You've come to take back what I've already returned." Even death became material for his final punchline. The key lies in proportionate mockery, laughing at the right things. Modern satire often targets the vulnerable. Stoic humor punches upward at folly itself. Marcus Aurelius mocked his own imperial power, calling it a carcass wrapped in purple. Epictetus, born enslaved, joked that anxiety was like carrying a house on your head. Their laughter wasn't escapism, it was sovereignty. By finding farce in misfortune, they reclaimed agency over their reactions. Try this tonight. List 3 daily irritants: traffic, spam emails, noisy neighbors, and rewrite them as absurdist hackers. Honking chorus sings / my commute's opera / horns replace birdsong. You'll discover what Seneca knew: chaos loses its fangs when you greet it with a grin. As he wrote in on anger, no one returns to common sense faster than those who have laughed at themselves. The universe might not care about your plans, but that doesn't mean you can't laugh at the plot twists. The Stoics made a crucial distinction that flips modern thinking on its head. They divided everything in life into two categories: things that matter for our happiness and things that merely matter for convenience. They called this indifference to indifference, and mastering it is like learning to walk through a storm without getting drenched. Picture two travelers. One clutches their suitcase tightly, panicking when rain soaks the leather. The other walks freely, knowing the contents are waterproof. Both get wet, but only one suffers. That's the difference between valuing externals like wealth or reputation, which the Stoics called preferred indifference, and cherishing what's truly yours: your integrity, your resilience, your character, the only true goods. Take health, a classic preferred indifferent. The Stoics didn't say to neglect it. They exercised, ate well, and sought medical care. But when illness struck, they focused on what remained within their control: their attitude, their patience, their refusal to let pain erode their dignity. Emperor Marcus Aurelius suffered chronic ailments, yet his journals reveal no self-pity, just steady determination to meet each day with virtue intact. Contrast this with how many of us treat minor setbacks. A single negative comment online can ruin our week, as if our worth depended on strangers' keyboards. The Stoic asks, if I lost this job, this follower account, this social standing, who would I still be? The answer is where real freedom lives. Now pair this with the art of acquiescence, a phrase that sounds passive but is anything but. Imagine you're sailing to a distant island. Suddenly, the wind shifts, pushing you off course. You could strain against the tiller, exhausting yourself fighting currents. Or you could adjust your sails, using the unexpected gusts to discover new shores. That's acquiescence, not surrender, but strategic adaptation. When the Stoic philosopher Cleans was mocked for hauling water to survive, he didn't rage or quit philosophy. He joked that his labor strengthened his arms for thinking. The obstacle became his compass. Modern psychology echoes this. Studies on radical acceptance show that patients who stop resisting chronic pain, not liking it, but ceasing to battle its existence, report higher quality of life than those demanding an impossible return to normal. A startup founder who pivots when markets shift, a parent who adapts when a child's dreams diverge from their own, these are practitioners of Stoic acquiescence. The key isn't passivity, it's discerning when to push and when to pivot. Here's the litmus test for indifference. If you lost this thing overnight, would you still recognize yourself? Your bank account, no. Your courage in facing the loss, absolutely. And acquiescence, that's the moment you stop screaming at the wave and learn to ride it. Together, these frames don't just weather chaos, they transform it into the very wind that propels you forward. There's a moment fractional, almost invisible, between the event that shakes you and the reaction that follows. The ancient teacher Musonius Rufus called this the Stoic Pause, and mastering it might be the most practical skill Stoicism offers for modern chaos. Picture this: you've just received an email accusing you of dropping the ball on a project. Your face flushes, fingers hover over the keyboard, ready to fire back a defense. But right there, in that sliver of silence between the insult and your reply, lies a hidden doorway, one the Stoics knew led directly to freedom. Musonius taught that every external event is neutral until we assign it meaning. The email isn't inherently enraging, it's just pixels on a screen. Your interpretation, "they're undermining me," is what ignites the fury. But here's the twist: that gap between stimulus and response is where your power lies. Neuroscience confirms this. Studies at Yale show that even a 1.5 second delay before reacting to a threat significantly reduces amygdala hijack, the brain's panic mode. The Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they recognized this pause as the difference between being swept away by the current and choosing to swim. Consider how modern tools hijack this pause. Social media platforms are engineered to eliminate it. Endless scrolls, instant reactions, heartbeats racing over strangers' opinions. But history's wisest crisis managers operate differently. When Abraham Lincoln received a blistering letter from General McClellan during the Civil War, he wrote a furious reply and then placed it unsent in his desk drawer. That pause allowed him to recalibrate, turning a potential feud into strategic silence. The email chains you regret, the texts sent in anger, they're all failures of the Stoic pause. Try this today. Next time your phone pings with a triggering message, physically place it face down for 10 breaths. In that space, ask Musonius's 3 questions. Is this truly harmful or just uncomfortable? Is my interpretation factual or fictional? What would my best self do next? That tiny delay, whether facing a toddler's tantrum or a boardroom ambush, transforms reactions into responses. The pause isn't passive, it's the eye of the storm where clarity lives. As Musonius told his students, we suffer not from the events themselves, but from the judgments we attach to them. Close the gap between what happens and how you handle it, and chaos loses its grip. Your inbox may still overflow, but your peace no longer depends on it. In ancient Rome, when a victorious general paraded through the streets in a triumphal procession, a slave stood behind him whispering a reminder, look behind you. Remember you are mortal. The Stoics took this further. They believed the true measure of a life wasn't the cheers of the crowd, but the echo of your character in the hearts of those you touched. Fast forward to today, where LinkedIn feeds pulse with humble brags about promotions and viral posts, where follower counts masquerade as worth. The modern gladiator doesn't face lions in the arena. They battle algorithms for engagement, mistaking visibility for virtue. Consider 2 professionals. The first spends hours crafting the perfect post, polished anecdotes, strategic hashtags, just the right mix of vulnerability and triumph to rack up likes. The second quietly mentors junior colleagues, declines credit to share it, and treats even rushed emails with respect. The Stoics would argue that only one is building something lasting. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the known world, wrote in his private journal, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one, not appear as one. Not network like one, be one when no one's watching, when the metrics won't reflect it, when the effort leaves no digital trace. History's most enduring figures often lacked contemporary acclaim. Epictetus, born enslaved, never trended on Roman Twitter. His student Arrian recorded his teachings precisely because they transcended the fashions of the day. Contrast that with modern thought leaders who chase virality by repackaging wisdom into listicles branded with their face. The Stoics called this prosopon, the mask of social performance, and warned it corrodes integrity. When Cato the Younger, known for his unbending principles, was ridiculed for wearing outdated clothing in the Senate, he replied, "I'd rather be out of step with fashion than out of step with myself." The chilling truth about legacy: reputation is what others think of you, character is what you know about yourself. A resume filled with accolades can't compensate for private compromises. Seneca wrote letters consoling friends who lost status, reminding them, "No one can take from you what you didn't place in others' hands." Modern psychology validates this. Studies on moral identity show that people who define success internally by growth, relationships, integrity report higher life satisfaction than those fixated on external validation, titles, likes, rankings. Here's the litmus test. Imagine 2 versions of your funeral. In the first, attendees recite your job titles and follower counts. In the second, they describe how you made them feel, the patience you showed a struggling teammate, the honesty you modeled when tempted to cut corners. Which gathering would leave a deeper mark? That's the Stoic compass. This isn't about rejecting ambition. The Stoics pursued excellence fiercely, but as a byproduct of virtue, not its substitute. When entrepreneur Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard donated his billion-dollar company to fight climate change, he didn't frame it as a PR stunt. His statement read, "Earth is now our only shareholder." No influencer hashtags, just action aligned with conviction. The next time you're tempted to measure your worth by notifications, ask Marcus's question. What's left of you if they take away your job title, your platform, your social capital? The answer, that unshakable core, is the only legacy chaos can't erode. As the Stoics knew, the world might forget your achievements, but it will long remember how you made people feel in the quiet moments when metrics didn't matter. Seneca's essay on the shortness of life opens with a punch to the gut. It's not that we have too little time, but that we waste so much of it. But what does that actually look like in real terms? Let's do the math. If you're 30 years old with an average lifespan ahead of you, you've got roughly 2,600 weekends left. That's 2,600 Saturday mornings to savor coffee in sunlight, 2,600 chances to call your parents, 2,600 opportunities to finally write that book or mend that relationship or learn that skill. Now subtract weekends already booked with unavoidable obligations, work crises, illnesses, chores. Suddenly, those remaining free weekends feel terrifyingly finite. This isn't meant to paralyze you, it's meant to electrify your priorities. Seneca watched wealthy Romans squander years on gossip and banquets while complaining about time's scarcity. His remedy, treat time like a currency you're bleeding. Every minute spent scrolling angrily through comments or rehearsing grievances is a coin dropped into a void. Contrast that with the Stoic practice of time accounting, literally tracking how you spend your days, not to micromanage, but to audit whether your actions align with your deepest values. When entrepreneur Felix Dennis was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he didn't beg for more years. He recalculated his remaining days into hours, roughly 17,000, and asked, "How many of these will I trade for things that don't matter?" History's most prolific creators understood this urgency. Beethoven, going deaf, composed his Ninth Symphony with a timer on his desk, scribbling, "I must finish before the light fades." Astronomer Carl Sagan, knowing his cancer was terminal, rushed to complete Pale Blue Dot, dictating passages between treatments. These weren't acts of desperation, but fierce celebrations of time's preciousness. The Stoic twist: you don't need a diagnosis to live like this. Try this tonight. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 2 columns, time spent and time invested. Under spent, list activities that drained you: doom scrolling, grudges, obligatory small talk. Under invested, note moments that left you energized: reading to your child, brainstorming a project, helping a neighbor. The imbalance will horrify you, and that's good. Seneca called this holding a mirror to your days. Here's the paradox: confronting time's scarcity doesn't shrink your life, it expands your presence within it. When neuroscientists studied people who practiced Memento Mori reflections, they found heightened activity in brain regions linked to gratitude and focus. Those 17,000 hours, they're not a countdown, they're a spotlight, revealing which relationships deserve your patience, which grudges aren't worth their rent in your mind, which risks are too small to regret. As Seneca wrote, "You're afraid of death, but what about the thousands of days you've already lost to half living? The weekends ticking away aren't a threat, they're a gift, each one a tiny lifetime waiting to be claimed." Cicero, the great Roman statesman and Stoic thinker, once shared an analogy that cuts to the heart of modern anxiety. Imagine an archer drawing back his bow. He can take aim with perfect form, adjust for wind, and release the arrow with precision. But once that arrow leaves the string, it's no longer his to control. A sudden gust, a shifting target, even a bird flying into its path, none of these are his fault nor his failure. The Stoics called this the art of the archer, focusing relentlessly on what you can control: your effort, your preparation, your mindset, and releasing attachment to what you can't, the outcome. Think about how this applies to something as universal as a job search. You tailor your resume, research the company, practice interviews. These are your arrows, carefully crafted and aimed. But once you hit send or walk out of the interview room, the outcome belongs to forces beyond you. A hiring manager's mood, an internal reorganization, even a last-minute nepotism hire. The modern trap, measuring your worth by whether the arrow hits. The Stoic alternative, taking pride in the strength of your draw, the clarity of your aim. Creative fields embody this even more starkly. A novelist might spend years perfecting a manuscript, only to have it rejected by publishers for reasons entirely unrelated to quality, market trends, budget cuts, sheer bad timing. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter was turned down 12 times. The Stoic question isn't why didn't they see my genius, but did I give the work my full integrity? When filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki was asked about box office numbers, he shrugged. I make the film I believe in. The audience's reaction is their journey. That's the Archer's mindset, detached from outcomes without being detached from passion. Here's where modern hustle culture gets Stoicism backward. It preaches obsessive focus on results, hustle until the algorithms notice you. As if success were a math equation of effort plus luck. The Stoics argued the opposite. Tying your self-worth to outcomes is a recipe for exhaustion. Consider two musicians. One obsesses over streaming numbers, tailoring songs to trends, and spirals when a single underperforms. The other pours herself into each lyric, rehearses until her fingers ache, and performs like it's her last show regardless of crowd size. The first is enslaved to the arrow's path. The second finds freedom in the act of shooting. The psychological power here is profound. Studies on locus of control show that people who focus on effort over outcomes report higher motivation and lower burnout. Athletes who visualize perfect form rather than podium finishes often perform better because they're not paralyzed by the fear of missing the target. The Archer's secret isn't indifference, it's redirecting your care to the process where your agency actually lives. Try this reframe today. Pick a goal: landing a client, publishing a poem, fixing a strained relationship. List every element within your control: research, practice, reaching out, and those beyond it, their response, market conditions, others' biases. Then, and this is crucial, celebrate the first list like victories. Sent the email, that's a win. Showed up authentically, another. The rest, that's the wind. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet and withstand sudden and unexpected attacks. The Archer doesn't curse the wind, he adjusts his stance. So next time an arrow goes astray, ask Cicero's question: did I aim true? If the answer's yes, then the shot, whatever its landing, was never wasted. Picture this: you swipe right on a dating app, craft the perfect opener, and wait, only to be met with radio silence. The modern Archer here isn't just aiming for connection, they're battling algorithms, timing, and the sheer volume of options. The Stoic approach: pour energy into your profile's authenticity, your aim. Send thoughtful messages, your release, then detach from the outcome. Just as the Archer can't control the wind, you can't force a match. But here's the twist: this detachment isn't apathy. It's the freedom to enjoy the process, sharpening your humor, refining your interests without tying self-worth to replies. A study from Stanford found daters who focused on self-improvement over outcomes reported higher satisfaction, even with fewer matches. That's the Archer's mindset, valuing the draw over the hit. Now shift to startups. Silicon Valley glorifies the exit, the IPO or acquisition as the bullseye. But seasoned founders know most ventures fail regardless of effort. The Stoic founder's question isn't will this succeed, but am I building with integrity? When Airbnb's founders sold cereal boxes to fund their early days, they weren't guaranteed a win, they were committed to the act of creating. Like an archer adjusting for crosswinds, they pivoted from failed concepts until one arrow found its mark. The lesson: celebrate the iterations, not just the exits. Consider social media next. You spend hours on a post researching, editing, timing it perfectly, only for it to flop. The algorithm's whims are the archer's gusting wind. But the Stoic creator measures success by consistency, not virality. Comedian Gary Gulman famously tweeted jokes for years to minimal engagement before breaking through. His practice, the daily draw of the bow, mattered more than any single post's performance. Even parenting fits the frame. You instill values, model kindness, provide opportunities, your arrows. But your child's path, that's the wind. A Harvard study tracked parents who obsessed over outcomes, grades, accolades versus those who focused on effort and character. The latter group's kids showed higher resilience and creativity, traits no report card could capture. The Archer parent's triumph lies in the quality of the shot, not the target's bullseye. Finally, activism. You organize, protest, donate. Your arrows loose toward justice, but systemic change moves at its own pace. Civil rights leader John Lewis didn't know if his marches would alter laws, but he knew his marching mattered. The archer's courage lies in pulling the bow again and again, even when earlier shots seem lost in the storm. The common thread: control isn't the point, coherence is. Whether swiping, building, posting, parenting, or protesting, the bull's-eye isn't yours to command, but the strength of your draw, the truth of your aim. That's where legacy lives. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. There are brambles in the path, then go around." That's all you need to know. Nothing more, nothing less. The target moves, the archer adapts. Stoicism has survived 2 millennia not because it's rigid, but because it's resilient, yet some of its most powerful ideas have been twisted into caricatures that would make Epictetus sigh. The first distortion, mistaking emotional mastery for emotional suppression. Modern hustle culture loves to brandish Stoicism as a license to numb out, treating emotions like inconvenient static to be silenced. But the ancients never preached detachment from feeling, they advocated sovereignty over it. When Marcus Aurelius wept openly at his teacher's funeral, he wasn't betraying Stoic principles, he was embodying them. The goal isn't to erase grief or joy, but to prevent them from hijacking your moral compass. Imagine a ship's captain who ignores storm warnings because Stoics don't fear weather. That's not wisdom, it's recklessness. Neuroscientists now confirm what the Stoics intuited. Suppressing emotions amplifies their physical toll while acknowledging them with perspective. What Seneca called judging impressions reduces inflammation markers in the bloodstream. True Stoicism doesn't build walls around your heart. It teaches you to navigate storms without capsizing. Then there's the myth of passivity, the idea that Stoics meekly accept injustice because everything happens for a reason. This lazy interpretation ignores history's most defiant Stoics. Take Cotto the Younger, who starved himself rather than live under Julius Caesar's tyranny. Or Thrasea Paetus, executed by Nero for refusing to endorse his cruelty. Their resistance wasn't impulsive rage, it was principled action rooted in the discipline of assent. Modern activists like Martin Luther King Jr., influenced by Stoic thought, demonstrated this same fusion. Nonviolent protest isn't submission, it's strength channeled with precision. The Stoic question isn't should I act, but how can I act virtuously? When a coworker makes a racist remark, Stoicism doesn't counsel silence, it demands you calibrate response to impact. The dichotomy of control was never an excuse for apathy. Just ask the Stoic-inspired leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, who fought knowing the odds were hopeless. Perhaps the most insidious misstep is elitism, the notion that Stoicism is some intellectual badge for the privileged few. Epictetus, born enslaved, would have scoffed at this. His discourses, recorded by a student, are filled with street-level analogies: broken jugs, stray dogs, oil lamps, because wisdom wasn't confined to scrolls. Modern research echoes this. Trauma therapists use Stoic techniques with refugees and veterans because resilience isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline. When a single mother budgets groceries with the same intentionality Marcus used to govern Rome, that's Stoicism in action. The philosophy's durability lies in its democratization. It works whether you're navigating prison like James Stockdale or parenting a neurodivergent child. These distortions aren't harmless. Emotional suppression breeds burnout, passivity enables oppression, and elitism turns philosophy into a parlor game. The corrective: return to the source. Seneca's letters comfort grieving parents. Musonius Rufus taught Stoicism to enslaved women. Marcus' meditations were private reminders, not public performances. Stoicism, at its core, isn't about appearing unshakable, it's about becoming unshakably human. The next time someone claims Stoics don't feel, don't fight, or don't fail, remember, the philosophy survived not in ivory towers but in the mud and blood of lived courage. Its fingerprints are on the prison journals of dissidents and the playbooks of underdog athletes. That's the real Stoic legacy, not a set of rules but a forge for souls. Close your eyes for a moment, not to escape reality but to rehearse it. We're about to run a 60-second simulation, harnessing multiple Stoic frames to fortify you against real-world chaos. This isn't passive visualization, it's active training for the moment your boss blindsides you, your flight gets cancelled, or life throws a tantrum. Ready? Let's begin. First, ground yourself in the dichotomy of control. Picture a hectic Monday morning. Your alarm didn't go off. Rain soaks your clothes as you sprint to the bus, only to watch it pull away. Notice where your attention goes, the racing pulse, the clenched fists. Now shift focus, the missed bus, not yours to command, your breath, your next move. Entirely yours. This is Epictetus's gymnasium, the space between event and reaction where freedom lives. Next, layer in Amor Fati, that downpour, imagine welcoming it. Your soaked shirt becomes a reminder of nature's force, the delayed commute, a chance to observe the city's rhythm. Like James Dyson's 5,000 failed prototypes, this disaster is just raw material. Nietzsche whispers, what if this exact chaos was necessary for what comes next? Now, zoom out with the view from above. See yourself from a drone's perspective, a tiny figure in a sprawling metropolis. The panic you felt 3 breaths ago, from this altitude, it's a speck in the mosaic of your lifetime. Marcus Aurelius's words echo, how quickly all of this will vanish. Time for Premeditatio Malorum. Fast forward, you arrive late to work, your manager scowls, but you've rehearsed this, your response, I'll draft a contingency plan for next time. No defensiveness, just solution building. Like Seneca facing execution, you've already lived this moment in your mind. Now it's just logistics. Finally, ignite Sympatheia. The bus driver who left you stranded, picture his backstory, a sick child at home, a double shift. The barista who messes up your coffee, she's a student up since 4 a.m. Studying for exams, hierarchical circles expand. Strangers become neighbors, irritations, intersections of humanity. Open your eyes. That 60-second drill just rewired your neural pathways. UCLA research shows such mental rehearsals prime the brain for actual crises, reducing cortisol spikes by up to 23%. The chaos hasn't changed, but your capacity to meet it with clarity, creativity, even gratitude has just leveled up. The Stoics didn't wait for storms to practice ship handling. They trained in calm waters so tempests would find them ready. Your life will hand you endless missed buses and rainy Mondays. Now you'll greet them not as victims, but as students. Every drop, every delay, another stroke on the whetstone of your character. When real chaos hits, you won't need to recall these frames. They'll recall you. Like a sailor's knots tied in daylight, they'll hold when the night gets rough. The goal isn't to avoid the storm, it's to become the calm within it. Now go spill some coffee. The world's waiting to see what you'll do next. So there you have it, 25 frames forged in the fires of Stoic wisdom. Each one a piece of mental armor you can strap on before stepping into the battlefield of daily life. Think of them like a blacksmith's tools. The dichotomy of control is your hammer, Amor Fati your anvil, the view from above your chisel. But here's the catch, armor only works if you wear it. You wouldn't leave a suit of chainmail gathering dust in the closet before a duel, would you? This week, I challenge you to pick just 3 of these frames and test them like a Stoic scientist. Maybe start with the simplest, the Stoic Pause. Next time your inbox pings with something frustrating, physically turn away for 10 seconds. Breathe 4 in, 2 hold, 6 out cleans ancient rhythm. Notice how the urge to fire off a reactive email weakens when you starve it of immediacy. Or try voluntary discomfort. Skip the snooze button once this week. Take a cold shower or walk a mile without your phone. Not as punishment, but as a reminder that comfort is a preference, not a necessity. And then there's Memento Mori. Before bed, jot down 1 thing you'd regret not doing if today were your last. Watch how it sharpens your tomorrow. This isn't about overhauling your life overnight. The Stoics didn't build Rome in a day, they laid 1 brick at a time, each one mortared with intention. Your 3 chosen frames are those bricks. Stack them deliberately. Epictetus, the philosopher born into slavery, knew something about unbeatable strength. He watched men crumble under far less than he endured, not because they were weak, but because they'd never trained their minds to meet chaos as an ally. His promise rings across 2,000 years. No one is stronger than someone unconquerable by chaos. Not unshaken by it, not untouched by it, unconquerable. That's the Stoic holy grail, not a life without storms, but a soul that learns to sail in them. So go on, pick your 3. The chaos is coming either way. The only question is, will it find you armored? Now it's your turn, because Stoicism wasn't meant to be a philosophy locked in dusty scrolls. It's a living practice sharpened through real-world battles. Think back to the last time chaos knocked on your door. Maybe it was a blown deadline, a heated argument, or just one of those days where everything felt upside down. Which Stoic frame did you reach for? Did you pause like Musonius, zoom out like Marcus, or find the hidden gift in the obstacle like Seneca? Drop your story in the comments below. Your wins, big or small, aren't just victories. They're lifelines for others navigating their own storms. Reading how someone used Amor Fati to reframe a job loss or the reserve clause to handle a breakup might be the spark another viewer needs. And if these frames resonated with you, don't stop here. Hit subscribe, because in part 2, we're diving into advanced Stoic maneuvers. Imagine tools like negative visualization to disarm anxiety before it strikes, or the discipline of desire to rewire what you chase in life. These aren't just theories, they're battlefield-tested tactics for thriving in a world that's equal parts chaos and opportunity. To keep these lessons at your fingertips, I've created a free checklist, your quick reference guide to all 25 frames. Print it, stick it on your fridge, or save it to your phone. Next time life throws a curveball, you'll have a playbook to respond with clarity, not panic. Grab it using the link in the description. Remember, the Stoics didn't study wisdom for applause, they practiced it for survival. Your journey doesn't end when this video does. It starts the moment you choose to wield these frames in the messy, beautiful, unpredictable arena of your daily life. So tell me in the comments, which frame will you test drive first? The chaos is coming, but this time you'll be ready.